Hi everyone, welcome on this new episode of Madas. So we're continuing the series now in English with our second guest. Here today I'm with Mada Seghete. She's the co-founder and head of strategy and market development at Branch. So for those of you who don't know, she's going to explain also what Branch do, right? So thank you, Mada, for being with me today on Madas.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. So we're here at Station F. So for those of you who don't know, Station F is the world's largest startup campus in the world. So I'm really thrilled to be there and conduct this interview. So my first question for you, Mada, before even we start, to dig in your journey, my question is, what is for you an entrepreneur?
It's an interesting question. I think at the end of it, an entrepreneur is someone who wants to start something new from scratch and who doesn't like the status quo and who's not necessarily someone who sees a problem and goes and tries to optimize it, but who goes and creates a new solution for it. And I think in general, those entrepreneurs tend to be people who end up starting new companies and new ideas, but I think you can have very entrepreneurial people in larger companies as well, who go on and see a problem and start something completely new or completely new project.
Have you ever wanted to be an entrepreneur? Can you tell us a bit more about your journey?
No, I didn't always want to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in Romania during communism. And the interesting thing about growing up in communism is that no one owned their own businesses. Everything was owned by the state. And then, the revolution came and Romania became privatized, and my mom was kind of part of that. She worked for one of the privatization funds. But I don't think I I didn't have any role models, right? There was no one around me. There wasn't even the guy owning the corner store, the restaurant. Even those were things that were just getting started then.
Okay.
And what we saw was all big corporations, right? So there were big corporations who came into Romania, like McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts, or just like Memories, or Carrefour, actually, who was the first shopping mall that came to Romania. And we saw these big corporations coming and really changing the market and making life better for us. So I think as I was growing up, my dream was to work in a big corporation, which is interesting because that's what I went and did. I went to the States and I got a degree, and then I went and I worked for Siemens Medical, and I worked as a software developer, and it was really great. And I took an entrepreneurship course in undergrad at Cornell, and I thought it would be so cool. I didn't really know what it meant to start a company, so I learned a little bit about it.
So what do they teach you in those courses?
They teach you, so I think it's very different the way I was taught at Cornell versus the courses at Stanford. But at Cornell, you just kind of learn how to build a business plan. And you have to look at the market and come up with an idea and build a business plan.
Okay.
I never built a business plan from Branch.
That's why
I think Stanford's approach, which was years later, was very, very different, right?
Okay.
In the States, there's a lot of immigration issues. So I had issues with my visa. Ended up either having to go back to school or leave the country.
You had to leave the country?
Because my work visa expired and they have a quota and I didn't get into the quota. It's really complicated. So I decided to apply back to school, and I ended up going to Stanford to do a management science and engineering program. And Stanford had something that was just being born at the time called the design school.
Okay.
And the design school is this kind of school where anyone from different graduate schools can take classes, and you use design principles to solve business problems.
Nice.
And I remember having these cool projects, including one where we built this kind of toolbar for Firefox. And, it was a project that day, but it ended up being super successful. People were buying cars on eBay through our toolbar. And there was I'm like, okay, just as a student project, we can build something that people are buying cars through. And I remember there was this professor in the design school, Michael Deering, who is now an investor. He has a firm. And I was helping him take something to the car after one class. And I took a few classes from him in the D school. And I remember telling him, I'm like, man, these people starting companies, it's so cool. I don't think I could ever do that.
Okay.
And I remember he stopped and he put the box down and he looked at me and he's like, Mada, I've seen you. You've taken some of my classes. I've seen you on these projects. I've seen you build a toolbar and all these other projects. What do you mean? like if you don't start a company, like who do you think will? Like who do you think are the people in the world who will start a company if not you? And that to me was probably the moment I decided to start a company.
Really? I mean, that moment was.
I had never like thought, and it's really interesting because no one ever told me I could, right? Like, you grow up in communism, you grow up where you don't like see the opportunity, and then like you see people around you when you're in Silicon Valley, you see people starting companies, but you don't think that could be you. So I think there's so much power into having someone who you admire telling you that they think you can do it.
Exactly.
Which is why I think there's this power of mentorship, and I think our duty as women entrepreneurs is to empower other women and tell them we believe in them and tell them that they can do it. Because, that one, like, I don't know, 5 minutes changed my life.
Exactly.
I don't think if I would have gone the entrepreneurship route otherwise. I had a job from Deloitte, which I ended up taking also for visa issues. But I decided then that I was going to find a path, and I did. I ended up working for a startup and then ended up starting a company. But it all started in that moment when someone believed in me and told me that they thought I could do it. And I think that's, really
Great.
important.
So can you tell our audience, what is your company doing? What did you launch? So when was it?
Yeah. So Branch, we have an interesting story, kind of a weird family story, which I think we didn't start as the company we are today. We were 3 business school students and an undergrad guy, and we wanted to build a company. And I think, you hear a lot of these stories that say, I felt this incredible pain, and I knew that I was the only person who solved it.
Yes, because that is solved, yeah.
That was not our story.
Okay.
Like, we were some kids who wanted to start a company, and we just kept trying and failing. So we first did Fitbit for dogs, and then we tried the photo book printing app, and then we tried the printing SDK, and then Branch was born out of all the lessons and the troubles that we had in mobile with the app.
Wow.
So for the first year and a half, same founders, did very, very different things, failed a ton, and we just kept going, and we wanted to build a company. We wanted to solve a real problem, and Branch ended up being the problem that we had with growth when we were building our own app. So it was a lot more of a closer, it was a real problem that we were passionate about that we're solving,
yes.
But we didn't start with that.
Yes.
So I think, for all the entrepreneurs out there who are maybe struggling to finding the idea, you do not have to start with the perfect idea, because you'll learn so much along the way. And if you think there's so many stories like ours, like Slack starting as a gaming company, and now they solved the problem that they had as gaming developers. So there's a lot of these stories. And I think what's really important, if you find the right team and you gel, that year and a half, that's failing, it's the year and a half in which you became a very strong team. So when we started Branch, which was 5.5 years ago, there weren't like fights, or we knew exactly what everyone was good at, what everyone was focused on. So we just went super fast.
Do you think an entrepreneur can succeed without failing?
No, there's no way. I mean, maybe if you're like Snapchat or... But even if you look at the stories of people who had very early start without failures, they end up in trouble later because they don't know how to fail. And there's no way you can build a big company without failing. So I actually think it's better to fail earlier and learn and build the grit. If you're too lucky at the beginning, I think it can bite you in the ass later on. Sorry for the warning.
No. And I mean, how do you see failure? I mean, for you, your previous companies, it didn't work out. What were the different things maybe you put in place to learn from those failures? All
our failures were really no product market fit.
Okay.
And I think most of the companies. There's the 2 big reasons I think companies fail. In the early stages, they don't find product market fit. They think they have it, but they don't.
Okay.
I think that was definitely our case. We thought we had product market fit with this photo book app, but we didn't really. Product market fit is this magical thing that is very hard to understand. You don't have until you've experienced having it.
Okay.
So I think I advise and I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who are like, oh, but 7 people like my product. I'm like, that is not product market fit.
Okay.
And then the other one, I think, is co-founders. And later on, I think a lot of companies implode because co-founders don't get along. It's kind of like boy bands, right?
Exactly.
The good ones, when they get along, they become very successful. When they don't get along, they all try to launch their own careers and doesn't quite work that well. So,
And do you have any tips for like finding the right co-founder?
find people different than you, and do not start something with friends.
With friends, yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah.
I think, and there's a reason for that. I think finding people different than you. I saw this with my classmates at business school. People who are very similar would start something, and then they would like have a really hard time figuring out the role. They would both want to be CEO, or they would both want to be COO, and they were so similar. While me and my co-founders are like completely different, right? Like I love being in public and speaking and promoting, and that was always my role. And Mike is super operational and detail-oriented and likes processes, and Alex is strategic. Like we're so different that it was never a question of who's doing what. It was like very clear that I should do all the promotional stuff and the marketing, and then there's the creative design stuff, and Mike should do all the like business. Like it was always very, very clear. And then the friend stuff, I think it's very hard to hold your friends accountable.
Okay.
So I think
Because there are a lot of emotions.
what if they suck? Are you going to fire your friend?
Yeah.
Are you going to go and tell your friend? It's much harder to give feedback to our close friends. It's much harder to push them. And I think it's just acquaintances is fine, but close friendships. I mean, I've seen many close friendships being ruined. It's okay to become friends with your founders, but I don't think you can start as friends.
Great, thank you, Mada. So I also want to talk about maybe like some figures, like right now at Branch. Can you tell us, our audience again, where are you? How many people work in your company? I know you raised also funds, and then we're going to talk about your more as an investor role as well. Can you tell us a bit more about currently?
So Branch is a unicorn. We're not very public about how much we'd raised.
Okay.
But I'll tell you it's more than 200 million. We are, I think, officially now 330 people.
Wow.
But we have about 100 open positions around the world.
Great to know.
So we're probably going to grow a ton in the next year.
Okay.
We are used by about 50,000 mobile apps out there to help fuel their growth and give their users better experiences. And we have 12 offices.
So seeing a woman, rising to the top, it's always an inspiring thing for all of us, early stage starting. I know now that you're also investing in early stage women-like projects. Can you tell a bit more about your vision about entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurship? Do you think other women also can do it? You've paved the way. Maybe some women say maybe in tech companies I can't really build one. Should I also surround myself with male co-founders? Can you tell us a bit your vision?
I actually think it's easier today than it was before. There are some incredible women founders.
Exactly.
One of my friends, Michelle, just took Cloudflare IPO. I was seeing it on Twitter, and she brought her children to the bell ringing ceremony. And I think, and Cloudflare is probably, you could say, even more technical than Branch. So I think there are a lot of women, amazing women, paving the way. I think as we were talking earlier, I actually think women who are building tech companies have an easier way fundraising because people understand tech. I think it's harder for women to fundraise in areas and markets that are very women focused.
Okay.
And I think because, and as we were saying, and I think a lot of that is because so many of the investors are male. So if you look worldwide, only 2% of the decision makers in funds are female. You see, female partners of funds, but junior partners don't actually have a say, and they're not the decision makers or where the money goes and how the deals are made. So I think one of the things that will help more women get funded, build really large companies, is actually having more women VCs who invest, who can back these women earlier on and understand that a woman CEO portrays confidence in a different way than the male CEO. I have a friend who got the term sheet pulled because the guy pretty much told her she's not aggressive enough with him, meaning she's not acting like a guy, right? So if you think about like the expectation of how you should be as a woman CEO, it can be different from VCs, but I think there's a lot of companies with women CEOs that are doing really well, and I think VCs are starting to understand that. But I do think having more women VCs will accelerate that path.
Can you tell us a bit why did you want to take this role and invest, yourself in early stage projects?
I think it's my duty to some extent. I think I had a lot of support. I was incredibly lucky to have mentors, co-founders, investors who believed in me. I want to do the same for the next generation of entrepreneurs. So I started investing. I work as a Sequoia scout. Sequoia has a fund, and they have these scouts that go and find companies. And I'm also part of a fund called X Factor, where I'm a partner, and we only invest in women. And I also made the decision that my own money, which is, I do very small checks. I'm a very early stage investor, but I'm only going to do it in women. So
Great.
It's just my philosophy. I think about it. When I think about investing, I don't really think about it as like I'm going to be super rich from my investments.
Yes.
I want to find the right companies. I want to also empower the right women. So I want to try to find, I think there are a lot of women who have potential, and I think if I can focus on that, it can actually help me probably have great returns, but also help the ecosystem.
Great, thank you so much, Mada. And one last question before we do like little 3 questions for the challenge. Do you have anyone that, because you said when you were young you didn't have any role model. Today, do you have someone that inspires you to push like harder, to that motivates you daily? Do you have a mentor that you want to share with us?
I don't have a mentor.
Okay.
What I do have is a group of women founders. We call each other feministas. I think we're about 12 of us, and we have this WhatsApp group. And it's incredible the kind of things we talk about. It's like, I don't know how much to pay a VP of engineering, or how to set up like preferred shares versus common shares.
Okay. So very practical questions.
Very practical, but also like, I'm having a really rough day, I need support. I'm going to the doctor and I'm not sure about the outcome of something. Like, it's an incredible group, and I think having that support has helped me a lot. And I didn't find that group until about maybe 2 years ago. I really wish I had it from the early days of Branch. It's really been incredible to have a community of kind of like-minded people who are, and they're very different stages. There are there's women who are just starting out and women that are further along than me.
Okay, good.
So having kind of a group like that, I think, can help a lot.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. It's very inspiring. We would have tons of questions to ask you, and this talk would last 1 hour. But we can't, obviously. So I have 3 little questions that, it's part of the Mel Talk Challenge. If you had one tip you want to share with us more about organizing your time and being focused, because we know being focused is also a key part of success. So what is your tip for organization?
It's hard, especially with the amount that I travel. I try to block time to do email, and then I try to also block time so I can do thinking. And then one really small tip I've started to get to impact 0, which I could never do before, is adding emails to tasks.
Yes.
So then I can actually get to impact 0, which makes my life a lot easier.
Great. One tool that you use, or one app that you use daily that you just can't, maybe a social network or a tool?
It's definitely Slack. I live in Slack.
Okay.
We're at the size of our company. Slack is the only way. Email is very important, but not. I feel I can feel the pulse of the company with Slack. It's the first thing. When I wake up in the morning, I don't check my email, I check my Slack notifications, because I know I will get notifications for things where I am needed.
Great.
So.
Nice. And last question, one book that you want to share with us, one reading?
Yeah, I have a good one.
That, maybe will inspire us as well?
I think one of my biggest struggles in growing a company has been to learn how to be a manager. Okay. I think when you are in bigger companies, you are taught how to be a manager, and you start with a small team and then a bigger, it's a lot more progress, it's a lot more training. So I think I read this book that I really wish I read 5 years ago when I started Branch. It's called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
Dare to Lead, okay.
Brené Brown is awesome. She writes a lot. All her books are awesome. But this one is so specific on how to be a good leader and manager. And how to show vulnerability, and I think it's specifically good for women because it talks a lot about the difference between being vulnerable and oversharing. I think it's good for guys as well, just because I think we all have a lot to learn from that book.
Yes.
So.
Okay, and do you think learning how to be a manager is something that goes along with growing your company? At some point, you have to learn those skills.
I think it depends who you are. I think, if you're a CEO who wants to just hire a great executive team, maybe you don't have to. But I think if you're more on the people side, I think it's important. I think if you build those skills, you will be a better CEO. You will be a better leader. So, yeah, I actually think it's really important. And I think, in the early days, you don't have that much to retain people. You probably don't pay them as much. Your equity is not worth as much. So if you give them opportunities to grow, if you help them grow, if you're a good manager, the likelihood of them staying with you and taking a pay cut to come and work for you are so much higher. So, yeah, I think it's really important.
Great. Thank you so much, Mada, for this
thanks
wonderful
for having
talk.
me.
I hope you guys loved it as much as I loved it. I will, if for those interested to know more about Mada's journey and branch, we'll put all the links down the video. And I'll see you for another episode of Mada.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just
No, it's great. No, you see, that's what I love also.